one of the topics we wanted to brief over real quick, there's been a lot of anxiety in the news and a lot of activity across the state regarding wildfires from utilities. So can you talk to us about what Rocky Mountain Power is doing, what's in the works related to how you're mitigating that risk?
Yeah, absolutely. A great question. So a couple of things. First, a few years ago, the legislature passed a bill on wildfire mitigation plans. And what that said is, as a utility here in Utah that operates in Utah, you need to provide a plan to the Public Service Commission and then work with the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands at DNR to show what are you going to do to stop or mitigate against wildfire in the state. And those plans have to be submitted every year. They have to be approved every year. And then if those plans are approved, then you go out and execute against those plans. And so that's step one. That's a forward-thinking piece of legislation about 4 years ago, sponsored by Representative Albrecht in the House. Then the floor sponsor in the Senate was Scott Sandel. And, that kind of laid the groundwork for what took place in the 2024 session, which a big bill was passed on energy security. I think it was called Energy Security Amendments, SB 224. And half that bill really talked about what was next or what else was needed. Because wildfire is a major issue. And it's not just a utility issue, it's a West-wide issue. We've seen big fires throughout the West, in Oregon, Hawaii last year, Texas recently, Iowa. There's just fire. And it's bad and it's not great. But because of that fire, there's been significant pressure on the insurance industry. And it's insurance for the utility, but also homeowners insurance. Like if you try and get homeowners insurance for fire in Summit County, it's just not going to happen. I have a friend that has a house in Iron County, and his fire insurance was canceled last year. So there's a big gap in insurance. In fact, Rocky Mountain Power has always carried in wildfire insurance, the Pacific Corp, but the market has significantly contracted. We used to be able to get $500 million worth of coverage for $25 million. Now we get $300 million worth of coverage for $125 million.
Holy cow. Wow.
Right. So there is a need to be able to cover for catastrophic events. So SB 224 is a process bill, and it creates processes by which the utility can do a couple of things. And one of the things we like to remind people, and I didn't come up with this, someone else much smarter than me came up with this phrase, that investor-owned utilities don't run their business. They provide information to the people who do run their business. And people who run their business are the regulators. So this authorizes the Public Service Commission to allow the utility to have a catastrophic wildfire fund. And so we'd have to apply for it. We'd have to make the case for it. We'd have to be able to say, this is what we need and why we need it, and go through all that process. Additionally, in order to do that, we'd have to operate against our wildfire mitigation plan to be able to do it. It's all there in black and white. We have to carry our current insurance. And then this is kind of like an umbrella catastrophic insurance, kind of that third tier, because no one's writing this, right? Like no one's going to write, no insurance company is going to write a catastrophic plan for a utility company. So in this legislation, it puts a cap. It says you can build this over time, over 10 years. And then it says, a surcharge to create this can be no larger than a percentage of a bill or even a dollar amount within that legislation. The key, though, is the goal. While there have been concerns, and you not talked about this, that what will this do to rates? And is this kind of carte blanche for the utility to just do whatever they want or turn their backs on their wildfire mitigation plans and just, be reckless? It's not that. In fact, the legislation is very, very clear. In order for the utility to participate in this, they have to continue to be aggressive in mitigation of the wildfires. Additionally, we have to maintain our other insurances, as I said. But our goal in this, and this is what our finance folks are saying, is by the state of Utah saying we care about protecting Utahns from fire. And again, as the law states, the bill states that this is for Utah fire only. It's not, as you know, Rocky Mountain Power, Pacific Corp is in multiple states, but this is a fund for you, paid into by Utahns for Utah fire only. This demonstrates to the market, to finance companies, as well as insurance companies, that Utah is serious about this. It should put downward pressure on the insurance that we're already carrying. So while that space is contracted, our hope, our goal is, as we've seen this legislation, is that by demonstrating to the other insurance companies that Utah has this catastrophic, it should create that space that we once saw. Keep in mind that insurance, the cost of insurance has always been at rates. As a Rocky Mountain Power customer, you're already paying for insurance. And because the growth in how much what we get has become so little, and we're paying much more for that will be in your rate as well. And so while there could be, if through this process, a surcharge, it's already something that is being paid for in your rate. And so our goal is to bring down what you're paying for in the rate for insurances, because there's been an explosion in that number, and offset it a little bit by a surcharge that was capped in the legislature.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so that's so really what it comes down to related to that is we need to signal to the market that Utah's serious about doing business here. We want to secure our business interests and our utility interests to be able to provide reliable power without potentially, I can see potentially the fire risks being such a huge risk that utilities don't want to develop anymore. And we need more energy in the state. And so this could potentially mitigate against that.
Harry, in all honesty, the biggest threat to energy right now, to electricity right now, is fire. Warren Buffett, who is the chief investor in Pacific Corp, right? We are part of Berkshire Hathaway Energy, puts out an annual letter to shareholders. And it came out recently, the end of February. And in the letter, he talks about the crisis of fire in the West and what it means as an investment to utilities, and what fire has broken the regulatory compact. And it makes it difficult for investors in utilities to even continue to participate. And your point is exactly right. In order for us to be able to continue to grow as a state, we need to be able to grow our load. We need to have as much electricity available as possible, as we want to bring more manufacturing to Utah, as we want to bring more people to Utah, as people come to Utah because it's a great place to live, work, and play. And if we are constricted because of fire, we're not going to invest in building more. We can't. And so this legislation sends a clear message to the market that Utah takes fire seriously. They want to have a plan in place. They expect the utility to have a plan in place, and the Utah state government says, we understand that this is a real crisis and we want to make sure we have solutions. It shows that Utah is serious about solving problems.
Perfect. Yeah. And I would say from my experience that Utah takes its energy very seriously. And this legislation points to that. But shifting gears a little bit, can we talk about the One Utah Summit and kind of why you think this type of a gathering might be helpful for a utility like Rocky Mountain Power, or just for the energy space in general, and why we should be supporting these types of events?
Yeah, let's be honest. Utah is great for a number of reasons, but the backbone of Utah's stability is energy. And I like to think it's electricity, but that's because of where I'm sitting and the job I do. But I've had the pleasure of working in and around energy for a number of years here. And, Utah's strength in its economy is energy and electricity. And the partnership that business has, doesn't matter what your business has, but the business has with the energy sector is the reason why people come and participate in Utah business in general. And as One Utah, as we look towards the future, as we look towards what's next, back of our minds has to always be what's happening in the energy space, what's happening in electricity space. Because as you know, energy is useless, it's power that is valuable. And so as we talk about, as people get together and talk about how to grow Utah in the right way, in the right speed, what can either be a catalyst or an interrupter of that is what's happening with power. And so that's one of the reasons why we participate at Rocky Mountain Power, is to make sure we're having the conversations, that we're listening to the growth trends, that we're understanding what people's needs are, but also that we're doing it in a way that is beneficial. And there are pressures that are not just here in Utah, but there are pressures throughout the West. There are federal pressures. There are all kinds of pressures on energy, and getting the right people in the room. And there are a lot of people that attend this event, and if you're there, then you can hear about these issues, understand how it can affect your business, and then work together to find the solutions. The great thing is about the summit, and the great thing about who it attracts is it attracts problem solvers. And you know, as a state of Utah, we are, as a business that operates in Utah, we're interested in working with problem solvers, because there just isn't time to complain. We just have to go and do.
Yeah, that's my perspective as well. I mean, I like how you brought up the economic development side of things, because this really is it's kind of a twofold. It's economic development, and that's kind of the powerhouse of this summit. Is it's primarily geared towards economic development. But when you get into any deep conversations, you're always going to have the conversation eventually. Where's the energy? Especially if you're a big development project. I mean, we're hearing projects with data centers or manufacturing plants, like you said. That take a lot of energy, and so those conversations are happening, and the summit offers an opportunity to get face to face with those people. But to get more prescriptive, could I ask? I mean, you've been in your position a couple of years now. What benefits have you seen on from your side, from your perspective, working for Rocky Mountain Power, that have come from participating in the summits?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that probably the chief benefit is to understand the direction that the governor and his cabinet, as well as members of the legislature, want the state to go. So the governor always speaks and provides direction about what's next. Additionally, many legislators, heads of agencies, as well as business leaders are there to discuss the issues of the day. And so myself personally and members of my colleagues here have participated for a number of years in these summits, and to be there, to listen, to understand the direction, helps us as we develop what's next for us as we serve the people of Utah. You know, and you know, I've spoken at these summits. Our CEO has spoken at these summits, and we don't need to be speakers at these summits to have it be beneficial for us. We appreciate kind of the main takeaway is perspective, and what's guiding the state, and how can we as a state work together. And I think that's kind of the primary takeaway for me, is like just the ability to listen and to see who's talking, and to see that it's serious people talking about serious things. That's the best thing about this, is it's serious.
Yeah, and it brings the whole industry together as well, which is kind of fun, right? You bring in I mean, I know you're an electricity guy, but it also brings your oil and gas guys and gals to the summit, and it brings your folks in the transportation sector as well. All of its energy and all the economy revolves and operates because of the availability of energy in Utah. And I feel like it's these collaborations that bring industry together, that ensure that Utah maintains its reliable and affordable sources of energy, which, in my opinion, the fact that that energy in Utah is both reliable and affordable, that is what has propelled our economy to where it's at today. And you see that at this summit. So at this time, I think we've kind of, we've buttered up the One Utah Summit people with One Utah Summit stuff. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, they're good.
I mean, we can talk about, coal, nuclear, pumped hydro, anything that you want to message out about there.
So how about this? What was interesting in this most recent legislative session is that the government of Utah, the legislature, supported by the governor, indicated that we are still committed to be an all of the above state, and not but, and how we go about that is important, and with the focus on dispatchability. There were a number of bills. Colin Jack sponsored a number of bills. Scott Samuel sponsored a bill that focused on what is it that will drive energy decisions over the next 20 years, and identifying having dispatchable resources is an interesting idea. And the legislature kind of drawing a line in the sand, saying we don't want to be short on resources. We want to make sure that there's space for innovation, that we're not just going to throw an arbitrary date out there and say by this date things need to be available and built. We want to give runway to do new and interesting things, but at the meantime we want to make sure that we are, as a state, we're making choices, and we are encouraging those who work in the energy space to make choices around dispatchability. Is a new idea, but it's not necessarily new, because we've always believed that as a state. States always believe that, but lighting it out in 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of legislation is the state saying, like, this is what's important to us. We don't want to be short on resources. We don't want to find ourselves in a position where we have to make a choice between keeping our lights on or turning our lights off. Like, that to me was an interesting byproduct of this last legislative session, as both the House and the Senate, when listed their priorities prior to the session, said energy, reliability, and security were going to be their top priorities, and they went out and did it. And the governor's always been in on that. And the governor's always said, this is really important to me. And so, I think that as people attend the One Utah Summit, they'll hear a continuation of that theme that we saw in the legislative session. They'll hear speakers that talk about that in many of different ways, and what energy security means. And energy security means a lot of things to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, and you and I have talked about this frequently, we're doing our job right in the energy sector if people never think about us. Yep. Right? Like, if you flip the switch in your house and the lights come on, and with ease, then great. We don't want people spending a lot of time thinking about it. And same thing, whether you're an electricity person or a natural gas person or an oil and gas transportation fuels person, your goal is to just provide an essential service, get out of the way, let people go about building their lives, caring for their families, and driving the economy. And so having the state kind of indicate dispatchability is going to be our top priority, that I think sends a clear message to those of us in the energy field that, like, we want you guys to be, like, unnoticeable. We want people to just go about their business.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really interesting point, right? So when somebody has to think about, should I flip my switch on? Is it going to be too much if I turn my light on, or is it going to be there if I flip the switch?
Yeah.
Right. Like, we haven't had to have those conversations in Utah, and we don't want to have those conversations, right? We want people to not have to think about it, so they can think about other ways to get involved in the economy and to benefit their lives and also the lives of those that are around them. If they're worrying about where their electricity is going to come from and how they might cook their food or how they might take a hot shower or whatever it might be, they're not focused on the bigger picture. They're thinking of the immediate, the right now. And so if we can have dispatchable, resilient, affordable energy, then we've solved a lot of the problems right up front.